Hi guys, welcome to Nature Story and Discovery Time. Today is going to be all about owls. We're going to start by reading a book called Owl Moon. This book is by Jane Yolen and illustrated by John Schoenherr. We are then going to talk about some cool owl facts. We're going to learn about some of the owls you can find in this area and their calls. And we're going to finish by making our very own owls out of toilet paper tubes. It's gonna be a really cool craft. Okay, so let's get started with our story. Owl Moon. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind, the trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us a train whistle blew, long and low like a sad, sad song. You can see their little house there, their farmhouse. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled down over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out, "Trains and dogs," for a real long time, and when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on toward the woods, Pa and I. There they are, walking towards the woods. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up, and my short round shadow bumped after me. See their long shadows there? But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I have been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. We reached the line of pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up, as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. Then he called, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo," the sound of a great horned owl. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Ooh, ooh. Can you make that sound? We're gonna learn more about that later. Again he called out, and then again. After each call he was silent, and for a moment we both listened. But there was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said sometimes there's an owl, and sometimes there isn't. See, there's a little raccoon or something in the tree, though. We walked on. I could feel the cold, as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back, and my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time. But I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. There they are, tromping through the snow. He's getting cold. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kinds of things hid behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. There he is, trying to be brave in all those trees. I think I'd be a little scared if it was nighttime and I was out in the woods. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. Big open clearing there. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over the scarf over my nose and listened hard, and then Pa called, Hoo, 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 hoo. Hoo, 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 hoo. I listened and looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. Pa raised his face to call out again. But before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. Hoo, 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 hoo. What do you think that is? Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, hoo, 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 hoo. Just as if he and the owl were talking about supper, or about the woods, or the moon, or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf, off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. Seems like they may have found their owl. The owl's call came closer from high up in the trees, on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl's shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over to us. We watched silently. With heat in our mouths, the heat of all those words we had not spoken, the shadow hooted again. Pa turned on his big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. Wow. Can you imagine looking up and seeing a massive owl landing on a branch? For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. I was just staring at them. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch, like a shadow without sound. It flew back into the forest. Time to go home, Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud, but I was a shadow as we walked home. I think he's kind of in awe of the owl he just saw. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says, the kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. All right, thank you for reading that story with me. I really love this one. Next, we are going to learn some cool owl facts, and we're going to learn the calls of some of the owls in our area. Stay with us. Hey friends, so now we are going to be talking a little bit about owls. We are going to learn some cool owl facts. We are going to learn the calls of some owls that we can hear in our area, and we are going to be making our own owls. I've got a more dressed up version here when I had some more craft supplies, and a more simplified version here for when I had just the paper towel tube and some markers. But right now, if you don't have them with you already, you should pause the video and go grab some toilet paper tubes like these, or maybe cut a paper towel tube in half, grab some markers and any other craft supplies you have that you want to use. If you have like construction paper and scissors and glue, that would be great. Maybe some googly eyes or feathers like these. That'll just make your owl even more exciting. So go grab those now if you don't have them, and then we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about some owl facts. Now, the first fact that I think a lot of people know already is that owls are awake at night and asleep during the day. And there's a special word for that. That word is nocturnal. Can you guys say that with me? Nocturnal. And because owls are nocturnal, they have to have really good senses. They have to have really good hearing and eyesight so that they can see and hear their prey while they're hunting at night, because they don't have the help of the daylight. So another cool fact about owls is that their ears don't line up next to each other. Our ears are right here. They're right across from each other, right? And owls' ears are, one is a little higher and one is a little lower. You can see on this diagram right here, it points out there's an upper ear and there's a lower ear. And this is supposed to help them better identify where their prey is. They can hear their prey, but because their ears are off center like this, it means that they can better tell where their prey is. The other thing that helps them tell where their prey is they've got a face that's sort of shaped like a disc. It kind of curves like inward, and that helps move the sound to their ears so that they can better hear those sounds for their prey. Another cool thing about owls is that their head and eyes are different from ours. Our eyes, if you're staying still, you can look left, you can look right, you can look up, you can look down, you can move your eyeballs around. Owls can't do that. Their eyes stay in one spot. So if you want to see what that's like, you just take your hands like this and put them up to your eyes and try to look around. You realize you can't really look to your left or your right. You have to turn your head or even your whole body to look to the left or the right. This is what it's like to be an owl. But it's not so much of a problem because owls can turn their head much further than we can. Owls, it's often said, can turn their head in a full circle. That's not actually true. Owls can turn their head like us to the left, to the right, but then they can also look behind themselves. So you can start at the front and they'll look all the way behind themselves, but they would have to come back to the front to look behind themselves this way. They can't spin in a full circle. That would be kind of silly. So owls have really great hearing, really great eyesight, and really interesting head movements. The last cool thing that I wanted to tell you guys about is that owls actually eat their prey whole. So when they find a mouse, they swoop down on it, grab it with their talons, and then they gobble it up. They actually are eating all the bones and fur too. But they can't actually digest that. So they make something called an owl pellet. They actually spit back out all the bones and all the fur. And if you see in this picture here, we can sort of tell that there are bones and fur there. And if you have a guide to tell you about what different bones look like for different small animals, like different mice and voles, you can actually tell what the owl has been eating, which is a really cool science experiment to go dig into an owl pellet and try to figure out what bones go to what animal. Okay, now we're going to learn about some of the owl calls for owls in our area. So the first owl I want to tell you guys about is the barred owl. Not to be confused with the barn owl, they are two different owls. And this owl says, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" Can you guys say that with me? Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? That's sort of what it sounds like it's saying when you hear it. But I'm going to play you guys its actual sound just so we can compare. Can you hear in there? Kind of sounds like it. Our next owl is the great horned owl. And the great horned owl says, "Who's awake? Me too." This is sort of the classic owl sound, the hoo hoo hoo, hoo hoo. This is what people think of when you say, "Oh, hoot like an owl." This is the owl that makes that sound. Let's hear it. Okay, and then the last owl we're going to learn about is called the eastern screech owl. And this owl is kind of funny. It's smaller than the other two, and the sound that it makes doesn't really sound like what we think an owl would sound like. It almost sounds like a high-pitched horse. If you guys think of what a horse sounds like, a horse whinnies, right? It goes, "Hey!" This owl kind of sounds like that. It sounds very high-pitched and like going, "Oh, hey." Let's listen to it. That sounds pretty silly, huh? Awesome. And so now that we've learned about our owls, it is time to make our own owls. So I hope you guys have those craft supplies with you. I have my toilet paper tube right here. I actually painted mine brown the other day, so mine's a little bit darker shade of brown. But the only thing that you have to have is this and something to draw with. But if you have more craft supplies, your owl will just look even cooler. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to make the two horns for our great horned owl. We're making great horned owls. And the way you do that, I just did it, you actually bend down one side and then the other. So I'll pop it back up and you can see I'll bend down this side and bend down this side. You can kind of even it out a little bit. And a really fun fact about the great horned owl, these two little horns aren't actually called horns, and they aren't even horns. They're little tufts of feathers, and they're called plumicorns. Can you guys say that word with me? Plumicorns. Kind of sounds like a unicorn, right? I think that's a really cool word. Okay, so now that you've done that, it's time to decorate your owl. That's all you had to do. So I have a couple of different things that I'm going to be using to decorate. I have some construction paper and some glue, and that is how I'm going to be decorating my owl, but I'm very curious to see how you guys are going to decorate your owls. I am going to be adding some eyes that I made. I cut out some paper and drew a little eyeball on. So I'm going to put a dot of glue, put that on my owl, give him some eyes because of course they need their eyes to see so well in the dark. And then after that, I'm going to be giving my owl a beak. I cut out a beak so that he could grab his prey with, and that is going to go on next. And I actually cut out a little tummy, so I'm going to put my tummy on my owl. And while you're doing this, I want you guys to be thinking about what kind of owl you're making. Our owls have plumicorns, so they could be great horned owls, but maybe you're creating a new owl species that no one's ever heard of before. This could be the first time we see an owl like that. And I'm curious what your owl will sound like. Will it sound like one of the owls we learned about, or will it sound different? I'm also going to be adding some wings that I cut out. I got one of them there, and I'll add the second one. And this is a really fun craft that is very flexible. You can do this craft whenever you have old toilet paper tubes. Just ask your adults, the adults in your life, if they've got leftover toilet paper tubes, and you can use markers, you could use any craft supplies to make your own owl. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some feet that I cut out. I'm going to put this on the bottom, and I'm actually going to put it inside like this. I'm going to hook it around and sort of set it like that so that that can dry. So this is what my owl looks like. I'm very curious to see what your owls will look like. If you want, you could email me photos at education2@gmcg.org, and I would be very excited to see the owls that you make. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with us for Nature Story and Discovery Time. I hope that you had a good time, learned some things about owls, and maybe you're going to go look for some owls in your backyard. Now that you know how to make the owl sounds, maybe you could do what Pa did in the book, and you can try to call for owls too when it's starting to get dark. Maybe you'll hear some call back to you. Well, we hope to see you next week, and thank you guys so much for coming. Bye.